So thank you for joining me. I'm going to take you through the Team Leader Supervisor Level 3 and Operations Departmental Manager Level 5 steps to success today. So hopefully you'll come away with from this with some useful information that you can obviously apply or look to obviously overcome any issues. So a bit about myself. My name's Lisa Williams and I am the lead IQA for Team Leader Supervisor and Operations Departmental Manager with Pearson. I've been in the training industry for over 10 years. I've been with Pearson as an endpoint assessor for the last couple of years, and I've been in the lead IQA role for coming up just to a year now. So there's been a lot of changes and evolving in that time as well. So the aims for today's session, so we're going to be looking at good practice that myself and my IEAs and IQAs have seen in regards to Team Leader, Supervisor and Operational Departmental Manager today. Any themes and actions, so hopefully obviously you can try and prepare your apprentice as much as possible to stop these occurring. And a key one, preparation. So what can you do to get them as prepared as possible to hopefully get them through that endpoint assessment the first time, and obviously hopefully coming out with distinctions. So we're going to look first of all at some good practice. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to go over the components for both qualifications, just to make sure everyone's clear and aware of what the components are, and then we'll go through these individually in a bit more detail. So for the Team Leader Supervisor Level 3, there's 4 components in which the apprentice undertakes. These can be undertaken in any order. It's not stipulated in the standard. Ideally, we do recommend the order that is shown on the screen, which is the multiple choice exam, portfolio of evidence, competency-based interview and professional discussion. We do find that by doing the multiple choice exam first, that does ease the apprentice into the endpoint assessment quite nicely, and it also just keeps it nice and neat as well with the portfolio. And we have had instances in the past where portfolios are outstanding for quite a while before that area is attempted, which obviously does draw it out for the apprentice. For the Operations Departmental Manager, so very similar to the Team Leader, that you have the multiple choice test, portfolio, competency-based interview and professional discussion, but then you also have the added extra of the project presentation. So again, we will go through these components individually, what you can do to get them prepared. And again, for the departmental manager, they can be undertaken in any order, but again, the order that I've put them on the slide there is our preferred order. Again, it just eases them in into the endpoint assessment. And we do find that the project presentation is also one of the areas that the apprentices want to get out of the way when we go and visit them on the day, or doing it remotely at the moment. That is something that they tend to be quite nervous about, so they do like to get that out of the way before they move into the other areas. So the multiple choice exam, we're not going to explore too in depth today. The multiple choice exam is obviously, as it states, it is multiple choice. So there is a range of questions in which the apprentice does need to select one answer to the questions posed. So for the multiple choice exam, information around this can be found in the additional resources and specification document. At Pearson, we do have mock exams for Team Leader and Operations Departmental Manager, and they can be quite good to use to get your apprentice used to undertaking the exam, and obviously you can then see what they're coming out at, and obviously that might help identify any areas that further development is needed in regards to knowledge for those areas. So the first area of good practice that we're going to look at is a portfolio. So in regards to good practice, we do tend to find the same things in relation to Team Leader and Operations Departmental Manager of what we're seeing in relation to the portfolio. So the portfolio, just to advise, we do like to have this no later than 5 working days prior to the other components. So the IEA has plenty of time to look and review and assess those. As you can appreciate, they are quite big documents to look at and can be quite time consuming. So that just makes sure that we have that sufficient time to review it. And then also if there is any areas we can question, we can do that when we visit the apprentice for their interview and professional discussion components. So in regards to portfolios, we have seen some good practice, and these are some of the key things that we've pulled out to bring up to you guys today. And we are grateful for these things as well. It does really help make our life a little bit easier as well. So in regards to the portfolio, it does really help when the portfolio is clearly structured and the evidence is clearly referenced. So we've seen various ways of this, of how people have approached this, but it does really help when the apprentice is noting the actual evidence number they are referring to and breaking it down into paragraphs and also kind of grouping it together. So they're talking about the information and then they're also referencing the evidence within that information, which is great because it saves us flicking about between things as well. Also as well, we've had ones where only the evidence that's being referenced in that portfolio is submitted, which is great as well. So we're not having to plough through extra documents that aren't referenced anywhere. So sometimes we do get things like certificates or gateway documents in the portfolio that obviously are not relevant to that. So it does help when it is streamlined and clearly referenced. Time-stamped audio, so we have seen this from a few providers, which is really helpful. We do get quite a lot of audio and some of them can be quite lengthy. We have had audio that's gone over an hour, up to 2 hours of a recording, and it might be that actually there's only 1 minute or a couple of minutes relating to a certain area that the apprentice is talking about. So time stamping does really help us to get to that particular point that the apprentice is flagging to us. Now, I must advise, obviously, if we listen to the time stamping and it's not there, we do listen to the full evidence, but it just does really help us to narrow it down more effectively. Also, as well, on the top of that, audio that is short. So we have had providers as well that will break down audios into 10-minute sections. So it's not one full recording, which again does help and make life a lot easier for the IEAs and IQAs. Other areas of good practice, so the golden thread, so where people are using key pieces of evidence to address more than one area. So they are streamlining the evidence and information that they're putting in, but they are managing to cover quite a few areas with that because it's a good example and supporting evidence. So as I say, it might be that there's only 10 pieces of evidence in there, but they have managed to score really well because they are key elements that are able to be crossed over. Resubmission, so hopefully we do hope that the apprentice is going to go through the first time. However, if an apprentice does resit, it does really help, and we have seen this where providers have resubmitted a portfolio and have clearly colour coded any new information and evidence that is being submitted in that resubmission. As you can imagine, there is a lot of information and evidence to go over, so it does help flag what is new within that portfolio, because when we are doing a resubmission, we are looking at what we failed against the first time and what you are now saying has been included to address that. So the notification of the results that we're flagging to you and what the apprentice hasn't done, we are then using that to identify if they've then addressed that area. So it does really help if the colour coding is there to make that stand out to us what that new information and evidence is. So as I say, that does also go into operations departmental manager as well. There is a portfolio and they are structured very similar. With the portfolio, it is great when people do use a Pearson referencing document. It does keep it a bit more streamlined. You don't have to use that, but I would just ask if you do use your own referencing document that it is clearly laid out and easy to navigate, because that can be quite time consuming and again can make life quite difficult for the IEAs and IQAs. Also, by using the Pearson document, hopefully you know the apprentice is responding to the correct questions that we're looking for, because I have had some referencing documents where the actual questions that's being asked of the apprentice isn't in line with the standard or what Pearsons are requiring. So competency-based interview. So again, this is in regards to both team lead and operations departmental manager, areas of good practice that we've seen. The best form of things we've seen is where the apprentice has clearly been prepared to undertake the assessment by undertaking practice assessments prior to getting to the actual live one with ourselves. We do get obviously information and feedback from apprentices, and we do find ones that have gone through mock ones do tend to perform better. They've got better confidence, they're more used to dealing with the timings and getting to the point. So it's less of a shock when they get to us that suddenly we're asking these questions. They've got to do a lot of talking and giving us examples as well. So by going through that mock exam, that does seem to help them, even if with nothing else, that their nerves and confidence. We've had apprentices that have been very good at giving to the point and specific examples. As I mentioned, the component is timed, and we do sometimes have apprentices that like to go around the houses to get to the actual point, which obviously does impact on time. So we have had apprentices that are to the point. Their answers haven't been particularly lengthy, but given us the detail that we need to award that mark, and they have gone through the interview in under the time that is available in that component. So preparation. So we have had apprentices that are clearly prepared and have come prepared to the assessments. So we do a planning meeting with the apprentices. We do try and do it direct with the apprentice where possible, but depending on the provider, sometimes we have to go through providers. So we do pass on key information to make sure that they've got everything that they need. However, it is great that when the provider is also doing that as well, so that apprentice is turning up with everything they possibly can to help them get through that assessment and achieve the best score possible. So again, preparation around timings. So we have had apprentices that have been practiced different components and undertaking those in timed events, which really helps them get their head around that they've not got all day to give their information. Evidence, so we've had apprentices come with some supporting evidence, which has been really key and helped them deliver their information to us. And pen and paper. So again, we have apprentices that come with a pen and paper, and they make a note of the question, or they make notes as they go through the interview, which has then really helped them to keep on track, which again has helped with the timings and getting that specific information and example out to us. We do find when they write that question down, it does have that light bulb moment that they do tend to refer back to it, and it does bring them back on track, which is really helpful and saves on prompts as well. Using the correct term of I, so within the interview, the apprentice does need to talk about what they have done, and some apprentices have been prepared for that. They have advised of that, that they've undertaken work and practice assessments where they have to make sure they talk about themselves, and that obviously any work that they're putting forward that states we is rejected. So their mindset has been trained to talk about themselves, which is really important in the endpoint assessment for team leader and operations departmental manager. So professional discussion, so again it goes across both standards here for good practice that we've seen. So again, preparation again is a key thing. Apprentices that have come prepared have done really well. Again, around timings, because the professional discussion, we do expect them to lead the professional discussion, so they've got to be able to judge to get their information out within a timely manner and obviously hit the areas that we're looking for. Evidence again, so again they are allowed supporting evidence in the professional discussion, things like personal development plans and CPD logs, and again we do find that when apprentices bring those, that can help them keep them on track in regards to what they're telling us about their learning and development. It just gives them that bit of structure, and hopefully it just again gives them that light bulb moment that if they do go a bit blank, they can use that to refer to and get that information out to us. And then again, a pen and paper, so again they can note down the question, and again that sometimes just gives them that chance to digest that question when they're writing it down. We've had apprentices that write it down and then take a few minutes to read it over a couple of times before then delivering their information to us. Obviously, I must stress any notes they make in that assessment are destroyed. We do ask them to destroy the questions before they leave, because obviously it's a controlled assessment. Again, professional discussion, we've had apprentices that have undertaken training in regards to the context that they're applying their information, and them using the term I, especially in professional discussion, because we're not able to prompt them outside the preset prompts. So that training that they've undertaken has really helped them to make sure that they've not wavered from that, and they've clearly detailed what learning and development they have undertaken and achieved. Keeping it simple, so we've had apprentices that have come in and have been clear and provided us with a couple of learning development goals, but they've given really detailed information in relation to those, rather than trying to talk about 10 different learning and development goals and actually not giving us any detail or information around those. So short and sweet has worked for a lot of apprentices, where they have maybe 2 or 3 key goals that they want to talk about, and then they've talked through the process of those. So for those of you that do have operations departmental manager apprentices, obviously there's an additional component of the project presentation. So again, these are areas of good practice that we have seen coming through. So again, you will see that throughout all the slides is preparation. So with the presentation, they get 15 minutes in which to present their information to us, which is quite tight to talk around a project that they've undertaken. So again, apprentices have gone through some training around timings and delivering, again, to the point and information. And practice and prompt cards. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the project presentation is quite nerve-wracking for a lot of the apprentices, and some of them have undergone practice attempts with different people before they've come through to us at endpoint assessment, which has really helped their confidence, and it also makes them clear on the information that they're delivering, because the more times of practice, the more they know what they're talking about, and the more natural it becomes. And prompt cards. So in the project presentation, they're not allowed to have scripted notes, but they are allowed to have bullet points or prompt cards. Some apprentices have brought those to assist, and that has really helped them, again, just make sure that they hit those key points that they need to do so, and to keep them structured and on point within that 15 minutes. Again, simple and to the point. So projects that have been quite straightforward and simple have worked really well in regards to the apprentice and what they're delivering and talking about, because they've lived and breathed it, and it's something that they've been involved in and understand. They've not tried to overcomplicate it, which then trips them up, or they're not able to get that information out to us. Confidence. So as I mentioned already, we have had some apprentices that have been really confident, and when we've spoken to them, they have mentioned that they've done some practice leading up to the endpoint assessment. They've delivered to different people within their organisation or people outside of their organisation, and that does tend to, the more they've done it, it does necessarily seem to help them just to relax and get that information out clearly, and they become more familiar with what they're saying. So again, that's less reliant on any notes or anything as well. So responsibility. So the apprentice has had full responsibility for the project. They've lived and breathed it. They've come up with the idea, and they've gone through all the stages of the project, which obviously helps when they then have to talk and present about it, because they've lived and breathed it. They can give that detailed and clear information. So just a few bits about Gateway then, in regards to team leader and operation departmental manager. So in regards to the portfolio and project presentation, we do ask that these are uploaded to ACE 360 no later than 5 working days prior to the interview and professional discussion and presentation if it's the operational manager. As I mentioned at the beginning, that makes sure that our IEAs have sufficient time to review those, and obviously they need to be familiar with what that apprentice is going to be delivering to them around their project presentation as well. Portfolios can be reviewed for ops manager or team leader on e-portfolio platforms. That is absolutely fine if you can't pull that off and put it onto the ACE 360 system. However, you just need to be aware that we will need access to that e-portfolio system. So our IEAs and IQAs will need to have logins to be able to access and assess that, and obviously quality assure that component as well. Also as well, when Pearsons are audited, that portfolio will have to be given access to the auditor as well at Pearsons' request. So we are quite flexible in how we review the portfolio, but again, we just need to make sure that we've got access to that no later than 5 working days before the assessments. If I can also please stress as well that you make sure that the apprentice's start date is correct on the A360 system. Providers do input that information, and that is really important to us as IEAs and IQAs. The reason being is that the portfolios and the project presentation, the information has to be based from the apprenticeship period. So if we have dates and work and information from an apprentice that falls before that start date, that is going to impact on that apprentice. So if the project has been undertaken prior to the start date of the apprenticeship, they are going to fail that component. So if we look at start date on ACE and we go by that, and it can impact, and then you obviously might say, well, that date isn't correct. So it is really important that that data on the system is correct, because it is used and it can impact on your apprentices if that's not inputted correctly. So I'm going to talk through some themes now that we've seen when obviously undertaking endpoint assessment and through quality assurance as well, and obviously any actions that you guys can look to put in place to hopefully prevent your apprentices coming through with these themes. So when we go out and see apprentices, or we conduct obviously remote assessments, obviously at the moment as well, we do get various comments from apprentices, and I have just made a note of the quite frequent ones that we get, and obviously I feel it's important to flag these to you as providers, so obviously you can help get your apprentices prepared as possible so there is no shocks when they get through to us. So some of the comments we've had from apprentices, and these are quite frequent ones, are that they've completed their apprenticeship and they've got their certificate. So obviously I am aware that providers are putting apprentices through additional qualifications to support the standards, so for example the ILM. However, the apprentice does seem confused at times that they believe that ILM is their apprenticeship, so that automatically means that they're going to pass their endpoint assessment, or that automatically fits into areas of the endpoint assessment. So it is a bit of a grey area for the apprentices at the time, when we have to make them aware that actually they need to achieve the endpoint assessment to achieve their apprenticeship. We have had quotes before asking why we're asking them questions around various areas when it's not relevant to their role. Obviously, the team leader standard is a standard that covers a range of areas, and it's not specific to a certain employer or a certain person's role within that company. The idea obviously is that the standard is that they will become an all-round team leader, so if they move from one organisation to the other, they would have the skills and knowledge. So we are finding that is still quite a common theme, that apprentices are saying we've not done that because it's not part of my role, and then obviously they get quite agitated at endpoint assessment when we're asking them questions that they've not done anything around. I'm not able to provide examples as I am not a team leader supervisor. So again, we have had people that haven't necessarily been in the right roles when they get to endpoint assessment, or again, I do appreciate that they may not be a team leader supervisor. However, they need to have been exposed to be able to carry out elements of the role in order to give examples at the endpoint assessment. So obviously, again, this is important when that apprentice is being put onto the programme, that the provider and employer are obviously working together, that if they're not in a team leader supervisor role, that they can be exposed to as much of the standard as possible to be able to live and breathe that, because it's not just about the knowledge, it's about having real life examples as well. Likewise, for people that are in the team leader supervisor role, we do get a lot of them that state they don't work on that area, it's not part of their responsibility. So finance is a key area that we get that a lot for. So again, it is important that they are exposed to these areas, even though it may not be part of their normal day-to-day duties, because again, they need to give examples of when they've lived and breathed it. So again, by getting the employer on board and hopefully allowing the apprentice to undertake these tasks will hopefully again allow them to be more successful in endpoint assessment and achieve a high mark as well. Again, I didn't know there was an exam at the end, we have had apprentices state that they weren't aware that they had to do exams until the last month before the end of their programme, and obviously that is quite a big shock for them when suddenly they've got a stranger sat in front of them and they've got to do all this work and different components. We've also had apprentices as well that have been informed that they must talk for 45 minutes. So for the professional discussion, we do encourage them to lead, and the component is 45 minutes long. We have had apprentices where they come and they've been informed by providers that they have got to talk for that full 45 minutes. That's not necessarily the case. And obviously we do make the apprentice aware of that before we move forward. And again, we do try and address these areas of concerns and questions with apprentices on the day or in the planning meeting. But as you can appreciate, some of these, it's too late by the time they get to us that there's nothing we can do about it. If obviously we're asking the questions and they've not been exposed to it, obviously there's nothing we can do other than unfortunately not award that area. So portfolio of evidence. So again, this goes across team leader and operational departmental manager in regards to the themes and issues that are coming out of this. So we do find a lot that specific examples are not being provided. So we do find that either the apprentice talks generically or that they talk about what they would do. We need real life examples of when they've lived and breathed this information. So even if they can tell us what they would do in regards to finance, it's not able to be awarded unless they actually give us a specific example. The context of the information. So again, we do get a lot where the apprentice states we throughout the information. And again, we're not able to assume that they're referring to themselves. They do need to talk about themselves and the actions they've taken. And that is a big one. We do see that a lot within the portfolio, which obviously can impact all the way through if that's how they approached it all the way. And again, the information is generic that they provide. As I've already mentioned, apprentices not being exposed to areas of the standard. So as I said before, key one is finance, another one is project management that we get within the portfolio. It's not part of my job role, or I don't do it, or they miss it out. So straight away they are dropping marks because they've not been exposed to that area. Again, even if they talk about finance and how they would manage it, we're not able to award it because they've not lived and breathed it. Vast amounts of evidence, again, is another big one. So we do find a lot of apprentices seem to scoop everything they possibly got and throw it into the portfolio. We do get portfolios where the number of pieces of evidence runs into the hundreds, and obviously that is quite excessive. So it's not necessarily about quantity, it's about quality. So juicy piece of evidence, hopefully you wouldn't need too many. We do find that although people have chucked a lot in, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to achieve anything. And we have had people that have put 100 pieces of evidence in, and unfortunately the mark has been 0 out of 20 because the information evidence is not sufficient still. So it's just about looking at streamlining and picking out those key areas. And as I've mentioned before, if there is an example and evidence that will go across a few of the questions, that's absolutely fine. When we are reviewing these portfolios, we do apply a holistic approach. So although an apprentice may have referenced something, we will look at that. But if it doesn't fit and we can find it elsewhere, we will apply that anyway. And obviously, as I mentioned before, with evidence, we do get a lot of audio. And again, if I can just ask that is the length of the audio is kept to quite short time periods. As I mentioned, we do listen to the full audio to make sure that obviously we're not missing anything, and we will review all evidence in the portfolio again to make sure it is a fair assessment. However, any help would be greatly appreciated from provider side in regards to making sure it is streamlined and sufficient. As I've mentioned before, we do have things put in portfolios such as functional skills practice papers or gateway documents or certificates of their ILM course or workbooks that are just not relevant to the standard in the portfolio, and obviously that does become quite time consuming. So qualifications, so as I mentioned before, apprentices are doing qualifications sometimes to run alongside the standard, which is absolutely fine. Obviously it's not mandatory for a team leader, but I know a lot of apprentices still do that to support with them with that. Again, that's absolutely fine. However, we do find apprentices and providers sometimes think that that automatically will cover the criteria of the endpoint assessment, and that's not necessarily the case. We do see a lot of workbooks, so ILM workbooks or ILM mark sheets being put in and referenced, and they are generic workbooks with just scenario questions and answers that are, again, not relevant because they're not specific examples of what the apprentice has done. Or obviously ILM mark sheets, again, which are not relevant. So it's just making it clear to the apprentice that some things may fit in that they've done in regards to that, but obviously they may still need to do extra to hit the actual criteria itself. It doesn't automatically mean that because they've done ILM that that's going to cover things off for them. Examples and evidence relating to outside the apprenticeship period. So as I mentioned about A316, the data, it is important that that start date is correct, because we do use that obviously for gateway and for when we're conducting the endpoint assessment. So we have had apprentices that put information in around maybe a project they've done, but when we've looked at this and the project had been done prior to the apprenticeship start date, so we're not able to take that information and evidence into account. The endpoint assessment, the apprentice has to talk and evidence what they've done during that apprenticeship period. So anything prior to that is not able to be accepted. And again, that is obviously disadvantaging the apprentice, that although they may have done it, we just simply can't accept it. So again, it's important that you are reviewing the rules around the different standards and what can and cannot be accepted. And again, that's why it's important that start date on ACE is correct, because obviously, again, if that's been inputted correctly, that could impact on the assessment. And then missing or poorly referenced evidence. So we do have portfolios where either the evidence doesn't open or evidence is referenced and it's not being provided, or we do have it where information is given and we have a range of evidence, but the actual evidence isn't referenced as to what fits with what information. So again, we do go through it. However, obviously, in reality, that's not necessarily our role. We are there to say whether they've hit it. So at the moment, we are looking through it and saying, OK, yeah, we found it. But that is something that we may look to tighten down on in the future, because, as mentioned, it is really time consuming. And obviously, really, that is something that apprentices should have been supported, and obviously ensure that it's clear to follow and navigate before providing. So just make sure that when evidence is uploaded to the ACE system that it is all there in relation to what the apprentice is referencing. Double checks are definitely a great way for the apprentice to go through and check again that their numbers or however they've referenced it are there and they're clear as well to that endpoint assessor, because obviously sometimes they make reference to a certain word or something, obviously we're not in their workplace or industry, if maybe what they're doing. So the clearer and simpler that can be, the better for everybody. So competency-based interview, so again, this runs across both standards. So a big one, I know I've mentioned it quite a few times, but it is a big one. We do see it very frequently, is the apprentices not being exposed to the areas of the standard. So again, in the competency-based interview, there's the range of areas that obviously the portfolio covers, so things like leading people, finance, project management. And again, we're getting apprentices saying that I don't do that as part of my job role, or I can't give you an example because I've never done it. And again, straight away they're dropping marks for that reason, because again, we do have to have real life examples. And as I say, finance is one of the big areas, closely followed by project management, in which they simply state, I can't answer that, I need to move on, I don't know. Understanding of terminology, so we do have apprentices where when we're asking them to maybe name a management theory or model, they're unable to provide the terminology in relation to that. Or the other way, they are able to give us a leadership style or a management model, but actually when we delve deeper, they don't actually understand it and not able to give us the detail behind the name of it. So they do need to have all of that information. So they need to not only be able to name something, they need to be able to show that they actually understand it and how they've applied it. We are able to apply prompts in the interview, so we can reword questions if we need to do so. However, we are limited on prompts to 2 per section. So those sections are things like project management, finance, leading people. So we are only permitted to apply 2 per section. And if we have to reword the question, that would count as a prompt. So obviously straight away they are losing a prompt quite quickly for something that they maybe could have obviously avoided. Advising, it's not part of their role, so this has not been undertaken within the course. So as I mentioned, we are still getting apprentices where they're saying, well, I didn't pick that as part of my course because it's not part of my job role, so why are you asking me these questions? And that does, obviously, as you can imagine, the apprentice at that point does get quite agitated, and obviously that, because it can put them off track for the rest of it. So again, it's just making sure that they are in that right role and they've been exposed to it. Again, the qualifications in ILM. So again, within that, we do get a lot of reference to, I did that in ILM, or I've talked about that, I put my ILM certificate in my portfolio. So again, it's about making them aware that that doesn't automatically fit into the endpoint assessment. For team leader and operational departmental manager, each component is standalone. So they do need to give us information example for each question. We're not able to reference from one to the other. And again, obviously, we need to have that information. So unfortunately, them stating that they've done the ILM and done it on that doesn't automatically mean that we can award that information. Context and delivery of information. So again, we get a lot of we do this, we did that, we worked on a project, we allocated work, we then checked what everybody did, and obviously from that we can't identify what their role was within that. So we do need them to be a bit selfish in the term that there is no I in team, and that this time they do need to be selfish and talk about themselves. So I undertook a project, I was responsible for setting the objectives of X, Y, and Z. I did this by putting a Gantt chart together, which I used by doing X, Y, and Z. So they do need to be explicit on what their information, their role was within that example. So again, we can prompt them to try and get out that information, but again, obviously we are limited. So if we have used all the prompts within that section, there's nothing the IEA can do, and obviously they're not going to be awarded that mark. So we would prompt them and say, what was your role within that? And hopefully they would change their approach to how that information is delivered. But obviously it is quite easy to lose marks around that. And again, it's that apprentice's mindset. So any preparation you can do around that prior to endpoint assessment is hopefully going to benefit them in the long run. Examples are provided outside the apprenticeship period. So as I mentioned again, if they give us examples and they say it's from 4 years ago and they start talking around an old employer or prior to the apprenticeship start date, again, we're not able to take that information into consideration. So again, that is something that you could help in making sure that your apprentice is aware of, that it's got to be during that apprenticeship period. So again, we can prompt around these, but as I mentioned, we are limited to the number of prompts that we have. And these are things that hopefully, if we get them prepared correctly, we're not going to have to waste prompts for those things such as the I and the context and obviously the examples. So professional discussion, so this does work very different to the competency-based interview in that the apprentice will lead this. So they are asked an overarching question and then hopefully they deliver their information. So from the professional discussions, again, the themes that we're seeing is that apprentices are overcomplicating it. So they're wanting to tell us about 20 learning and development goals that they've done, but actually they list them, but then they don't actually end up giving sufficient detail around any of them in regards to why they've done it and how they've done it and what the outcome has been. So they do try and overcomplicate. We do find the ones that try and pull it back a bit and only talk around a few do tend to give us that more likely to give us that key information. So we do find, as I say, that they do overcomplicate and that does impact on them and they lose their way. We do find a lot that they talk about other people's development, so their team's development, which in the professional discussion is not relevant. It is all around their own learning and development. And with the professional discussion, we are able to prompt, but they are preset. So that does impact. If they start talking about other people's development, those prompts we're not able to deviate from, and it may be that when we prompt them they don't change the angle that they're talking about. So that is quite a biggie and something that we see frequently. Again, context of information. So again, that we did this, we learned by doing research. We wanted to develop around project management tools. So again, that doesn't give us a clear indication of what their role was and what their learning development was. And again, I can't stress the prompts are preset, so there is nothing we can do. If that apprentice uses the term we throughout all their information, they're not going to be successful. Preparation to lead and use supporting evidence. So that again is something we see quite limited, that some apprentices are quite scared when they have to just talk to us to start with after we pose that overarching question. And their confidence goes, and they get a couple of minutes in, if even that, and then we have to apply the preset prompts, and it does tend to put them off, that they panic a little bit about what to talk about. And using supporting evidence. So again, we do get quite a lot that come to the professional discussion without any supporting evidence. Now, it's not mandatory, and it's not mandatory in the interview. However, in the professional discussion, it can really help them, because they can bring a personal development plan or CPD login, and the component is around their learning and development. So we do find that they tend to go off topic or off track, whereas by having that document, that can really help keep them on the path that we need. We do, however, again, have apprentices that do bring these documents and then don't use them. Again, we're not allowed to instruct them to look at those documents, and we can only take what they are verbally telling us. So again, preparation with apprentices around leading and having the confidence to deliver their information, but also using evidence effectively. So remember to use it and how to use it. And learning development is prior to the apprenticeship period. So again, we have them talk about learning development around another apprenticeship that they've done, or before they start their apprenticeship. And again, we're not able to take that into account. In the question posed, it does advise them that they've got to talk around the development during the apprenticeship period, but they don't always pick up on that. Or again, they just talk about something that is prior. So again, it's about getting them prepped that they do need to talk about what they've learned during their apprenticeship, because anything around what they're going to do after or before is not gonna help in this component. And again, even if they give us great information around what they've learned, they've done it, if it falls before the apprenticeship period, we're not able to take it into consideration. And again, the outcome is probably not going to be a positive one. So for those doing operations departmental manager, the project presentation, so themes that we're seeing through that are that the project is undertaken prior to the start date of the apprenticeship. We have had this on quite a number of occasions, and it has resulted in the apprentice failing the component. So again, I do recommend to stress that the additional resources document and specification are referred to make sure that you're compliant and in line with the endpoint assessment standards. So for the project, it needs to be something that the apprentice has undertaken within their apprenticeship period. It does recommend that this is undertaken towards the last 6 months of their apprenticeship, and that it's agreed between the employer and the provider. We have had a number of projects the apprentices have done before they've even got onto their apprenticeship, and we're not able to take that becomes a fail then. And again, that's again where I need to stress about the date on the ACE360 system. Timings, so the presentation, the apprentice is only permitted to present their information for up to 15 minutes, which is really short. We do find that apprentices have come and they've not practiced timings or delivering that information, and they get into that 15-minute mark and they've still got a lot of information that they want to tell us, but we have to bring that to a close. We do have to stop them, which obviously is impacting. The apprentice is not undertaking responsibility for the project, so we've had instances where the apprentice has just undertaken a part of the project, so they've been given a task in relation to a project. They've not actually had responsibility of that project from beginning to the end. Obviously, this is a level 5 qualification, and this is a project that the apprentice should be taking charge of and have responsibility for, and going through all the stages of a project. So again, them being allocated a task to do with the project and them not having responsibility for most of it is going to impact against them. Navigating of technology, so again we get them using technology on the day of the presentation and they've not tested it or they've not used it before or they've not practiced using it, which again that can then put them off when if there's any technical issues or they've not practiced and again they're hitting that 15-minute mark and we're having to stop them, or they're pressing the wrong buttons and going backwards in their presentation rather than forwards. So again, preparation around that is key, that if they're going to use that technology, that they practice it before, and it is their responsibility for any technology they want to use, it is their responsibility to provide that and to make sure that it's in full working order. Context of information, so again this has gone through all components and it is a massive one that we hear a lot of, is the term of we. So again, if that apprentice talks about we throughout the whole project presentation, we're not able to identify what their role was within that. Within the project presentation, we're not able to prompt or anything. We have 3 preset questions which we pose to the apprentice in the second half of the 15 minutes. We listen to their response, but there is nothing further we can ask them or prompt them around. So again, that training beforehand of the context of how that deliver that information is really important, because there's nothing we can do as endpoint assessors to try and draw that information from them. And confidence. So again, confidence is a big thing. We get apprentices that come and unfortunately they get really nervous and they struggle to get their words out, or they repeat the same information, or they maybe break down during that presentation, or they get lost and need a minute. And again, all of these things impact on that timing of the 15 minutes. So again, it's about getting them prepared. Obviously, we are total strangers to them. We've never met them. And again, the most confident of people that can be offered them. So again, preparation is key around that they feel comfortable in getting that information out as detailed and sufficient as they possibly can to hopefully hit the areas that are required. So I've just popped on some of the issues that we've gone over, and then obviously actions that providers can do to hopefully rectify these before the apprentice comes to endpoint assessment. So obviously I've mentioned it a lot throughout today's session, but the context of the information. So this is where they're saying we throughout their information, whether it be in the interview, the professional discussion, the portfolio or the presentation. So hopefully this can be combated by preparing your apprentices to talk about their actions. So if they're submitting work for that portfolio or during their apprenticeship, check the work, make sure they are talking about themselves in the correct tense, and hopefully by training them and their brain in that way, when they get to endpoint assessment, it will become more of a natural occurrence. And mock assessments, so practice mock assessments. Again, listen out for, are they using that context of we or I, and again, if they are using that in the mock, that's something that you can continue to work on before you decide to put them through that endpoint assessment. Lack of examples and supporting evidence. So obviously key things are to make sure that the apprentice is exposed to all areas of the standard, whether it is part of their job role or not, and this will allow for real life examples to be providing evidence. This is a key thing that can obviously let that apprentice down in the endpoint assessment, because all components have to relate to real life examples. And if they've not got any real life examples, they're being set up to fail, because obviously they can't give it to us and we're not able to award it based on what they would do. We're not able to do that. So that is a key aspect. They need to have lived and breathed it in order to get that information over to us. And obviously in the portfolio, it's not even just giving us the example, they need to have the evidence to back up that example. So again, that's where them being exposed and the context and the evidence comes into play, that obviously they're living and breathing it, they should hopefully have some really good evidence to back up that example. Timings, so again, undertaking mock assessments with them to encourage concise responses. We do have apprentices at one end of the scale that really struggle and give us one-word answers, which then leads to prompts having to be used really quickly, and obviously maybe we might not get the amount of detail that we need, or the assessment is done really quickly. The other hand, we get apprentices that like to talk a lot, but they go round about the houses to get the actual information itself if they ever actually get there. So again, because we're limited to prompts, that does impact on both ends of the scale. So it's about getting them to give that specific example to the point, and then obviously that will hopefully allow them to get through all of the questions within that time frame. Terminology. So as I mentioned earlier on, make sure the apprentice is exposed to terminology outside of their organisation, because the endpoint assessment isn't based on their organisation, it is a standard, and obviously they are expected to understand what different leadership styles or so it's about making sure that they are given that wider knowledge and understanding. And this could be checked. So can the apprentice not only name the leadership style, but also describe it? As I say, we do have it where they can reel off a load of names, but when we delve deeper, they don't understand what that actually means, or vice versa. They can describe a leadership style, but when you ask them to name it, they can't give us that name. And we do need the whole package. Confidence. So this is a big thing across all elements. As I mentioned, we are a stranger to them. They've never met us. We do obviously go over how our behaviour beforehand, about we're not allowed to say great or well done, and obviously that we're impartial and we're not able to give any feedback or praise or results on the day. That can still be quite intimidating for the apprentice, and obviously we do try and put them at ease, but obviously it is an assessment at the end of the day as well. So the apprentice could be prepared by being exposed to different people, talking for a period of time. So again, for mock assessments, it may be that you get somebody else to come in and do that with the apprentice rather than their usual trainer that they've got to know over the year and a half that they've been on that apprenticeship. And then a key thing at the bottom is about ensuring the apprentice has a copy of the additional resources document and specification to make sure that they can be as prepared as possible. So these documents are there to support providers and apprentices, and they should be allowed to access to these documents, so they can also take responsibility in helping be as prepared as possible before they move forward. And obviously these documents are key as well for the rules. As I mentioned before, we are having apprentices impacted because the rules haven't been adhered to around the standard. So again, those documents outline what is expected in regards to this. So things like that it has to be during the apprenticeship period. So it is key that you do keep up to date with the rules around the standard. And obviously, as anything changes, resources and documents are updated and released to providers as well. So apprentice preparation actions. So I'm just going to go over again some key things that can be done. So some of these are reiterated from earlier slides, but as I mentioned, they are really important, and hopefully this will eliminate some of the themes that we're seeing quite frequently, and hopefully it will also mean that your apprentice is going to pass first time and achieve a great mark as well to get them to that distinction outcome. So as mentioned, preparation is the key to all of this, and these steps are obviously important to be undertaken while on programme with the apprentice. So as I mentioned, give them a copy of those key documents. There's information around each component within those documents, and the apprentice needs to be clear on what it is that they're working towards. Prepare your apprentices to talk around their actions. Again, they need to give us real life examples and information on what they have done in those. Practice those timed assessments and conduct these by various people. Again, the more variety that apprentice can be exposed to, hopefully the more confident and comfortable they will become. Like detailed evidence to support the skills and behaviours. So when they're carrying out these real life examples, make sure that evidence is gathered so they can put that in their portfolio to back up the information that they're given. Because a fantastic example within the portfolio is not able to be awarded if the evidence isn't there to back that up, and that is a shame if they've lived and breathed it but they've not captured any evidence at that time towards it. And again, a key one, make sure they are exposed to all areas of the standard. So when that apprentice is coming on programme, look at what areas are they exposed to, what could they be exposed to further, and how is that going to be approached between the provider, the apprentice and the employer. So I've mentioned a few documents throughout this session today. So as I mentioned, the additional resources for both team leader and operations departmental manager, and there's also the specification document as well. These are key documents, as I mentioned, for yourselves, the employers and the apprentices. When these documents are updated, they are also sent out to yourselves as the updated version, and these documents are now also available on ACE360 system under the resources section. If anybody feels they haven't got these or they're unable to locate them, please let us know and we can obviously put you in the right direction to them on the system. That's not a problem. So I've just popped in a screenshot from the team leader one, just to give you an example if no one's of the kind of information that's in there. So as I've mentioned, the additional resources document does give information around all components of the team leader standard, and it does break it down into detail. It tells you what's required around the various components and the evidence requirements. So the screenshot that you see is in relation to the portfolio element of the team leader supervisor, and it's criteria and the evidence requirements regarding that. So it does give you that key information to help that apprentice be prepared. I've also then popped on the bottom of the slide the pages where you can find those areas in that greater detail. So we will be putting these slides on the website after today, so you can refer back to these, that's not a problem. But just in case you want to make a note of them, for the knowledge test, you can locate that in pages 2 to 53, the portfolio of evidence, page 54 to 96, competency-based interview, page 97 to 100, and the professional discussion, page 101 to 105. So for operations departmental manager, again, there is an additional resources document. Again, I've popped a screenshot in out of that document, and this is aimed around the competency-based interview to show you again the information that's contained in there. So you'll see that it's for the competency area of operational management, and then it shows you the 6 assessment criteria and the responses that we would be looking for from the apprentice. So again, in that document for operational departmental manager, again, it breaks it down into the different endpoint assessment components, and again, what responses we are looking for, what is required within the portfolio or the project presentation, and again, the rules around these as well. So again, in this document, and again, this will be shared on the website, the knowledge test can be page 3 to 54, the portfolio of evidence is page 55 to 104, competency-based interview, page 105 to 110, and the project presentation, page 111 to 125, and the professional discussion, page 126 to 130.